Imagine a bomber so heavily armed, so surprisingly resilient, it made the elite Luftwaffe question their own tactics. We're diving deep into the untold story of the B-17's defensive prowess, uncovering the shock and awe it inflicted on German pilots and exposing why their engagements with the Flying Fortress were far more terrifying than history books let on. December 1942 occupied Europe. Versuchsverband Oberbefehlshaber der Luftwaffe and 8th Air Force, a captured fortress, comes in hot and whole. The runway is a strip of winter steel, frost on the grass, oil on the wind. The bomber that should not be here rolls past the signal square and settles into the custody of men who once only saw it through gun sights. A flying fortress intact, camouflage dulled by salt and flak smoke. Windows starred, tires scuffed. The crew is gone, the airframe remains. It is the key and the lock in one. Word moves fast to the test fields and hangars. Engineers step out from brick offices with notebooks and pencils. Ground crews bring chocks and ladders. The air smells of glycol and fear. The code name passed along the fence line is simple. Fortress. They say it like a riddle. They say it like a dare. Hans Werner Lerche studies the airplane the way a watchmaker studies a foreign chronometer. He is a Luftwaffe test pilot who has flown the enemy's work before. He walks the perimeter of the wing. He notes the thickness of the spar. He reads the weight and balance plate on the nosewheel door. He touches the mountings that carry 50 caliber guns. He squints into the belly turret and measures the arc in his head. He is quiet. He is already flying the pattern in his mind. Inside the hangar, the fortress looks larger. The men look smaller. The gun stations turn into a map. Nose, top turret, waist left, waist right, radio hatch, tail, ball. Each with its own field, each with its own story. The American design does not hide the purpose. It declares it. No single gun is the point. The pattern is the point. Angles and arcs. Overlap and echo. A geometry of denial. The briefing the Germans carried into this winter was different. They believed the bomber could be split open by a straight pass from dead ahead. They believed the bellies were blind. They believed a fast head-on strike would shock the crew and break the box apart. They believed climb, fire, dive and roll would work again and again. Many had believed it because it had worked before. Belief is a habit that grows teeth. The fortress on the floor challenges the habit. You can see it in the way men lean closer to the nose. Extra mounts, improvised brackets, hand grips scarred by gloves, feed chutes snaking like ribs. The picture that forms is not a single cannon mouth. It is a chorus that fills space with lines you do not cross twice. Engines start outside. The cold bites harder. The test card on the clipboard is short. Ground runs, taxi checks, gear cycle, flap travel. Then a daylight climb to measure drag trim and vibration. The gun positions will be flown through mock attack cones. They will mark where fire converges. They will mark where fire crosses. They will write an atlas of danger zones. Takeoff. The runway drifts backward. The fortress gathers speed that looks slow but feels inevitable. The props bite clean air. The nose rises. The weight leaves the earth with a heavy promise. Lerche watches the needles. He speaks numbers in an even voice. He feels the airplane settle into a steady workman rhythm. This is a machine designed to endure. You sense it in your hands. You sense it in the way the airframe does not flinch. Altitude. The fields turn to a grey quilt. The sun is a dull coin. A pair of Messerschmitts wait at a distance with cameras and grease pencil boards. They are not here to kill. They are here to learn. They will run in at measured speed. They will hold set angles. They will break at timed marks. The fortress guns are cold, but the arcs are real. The cones intersect even when nothing fires. First pass from high ahead. In the sight picture, the fortress nose looks like a windowed cliff. You can almost feel the American chin coming, even if this airframe is an earlier mark. The top turret is the guardian at this angle. The cockpit glass warns like a lighthouse. The past does not feel clean. The notes say so. The chalk lines on the board say so. The camera films the hesitation. Second pass from low ahead. The ball turret is not a toy. Its sightline is a knife edge that reaches upward with a spite that surprises the fighters. The mathematics of it are simple. You do not get to live inside that wedge for long. The board draws a cross-hatched triangle and marks it with a blunt word: do not. Waist to quarter. The fortress yaw and roll, even slight, pull the arcs like a net being cast. The interlock is the truth you cannot deny. The gunners do not need perfection. They only need time on target measured in heartbeats. A line of tracers stitched across a windscreen is not a statistic. It is a sentence. The formation is not here, but every man can see it. Box to box, layer to layer, 12 fortresses, 18, 24, each with overlapping arcs that multiply into a moving fortress city. One airplane already feels costly to approach. A group turns the sky into a problem that punishes courage and rewards patience the attacker does not have. The camera runs. The chalk squeaks. The assumptions begin to bend. Back on the ground, the hangar is colder. Breath hangs white. The men argue over angles and speed margins. The conclusion, spoken softly at first, grows sharper as the boards fill. Head-on is a gamble against a wall of steel. Low astern is a tunnel lined with teeth. Beam is a corridor that narrows. The only safe moment is the one you do not take. The report will carry no drama. It will carry drawings and words that change doctrine because doctrine is supposed to serve survival. The fortress did not grow fangs in the hangar. The fangs were always there. The men who thought otherwise had only been lucky. Luck is not a plan. Firepower that overlaps is. The airplane on the floor is a single specimen. The lessons reach beyond it. Later marks will carry a full rake of 1350 caliber guns. Twin mounts forward, twin mounts above, twin mounts below. Single mounts at the windows, a twin sting in the tail. It is easy to count. It is harder to see how they sing together. The aria is geometry. The melody is discipline. The chorus is volume. 50 caliber is a number that reads clean, but it is also mass and reach. A heavy bullet leaves the barrel with authority and stays angry downrange. Cartridge belts curl through chutes like river reeds, and the boxes that feed them are heavy for a reason. Rate of fire turns weight into weather, not one weapon, a field of hail. You do not fly through weather because you want to. You fly through it because you must, and you pay. Gunners stand in cramped stations and become parts of a machine that thinks in angles. The noseman watches the forward quarter and holds the beat. The top turret sings to high arcs that dive fast. The ball turret draws a scythe across the lower hemisphere and dares anything to come up the throat. Waist gunners cut diagonals into the side doors of the sky. The tail gunner does not blink. He writes his message backward in sparks. None of them hunt. All of them deny. The Luftwaffe had believed the defensive story would break under speed. Dive hard, pass head-on, squeeze the trigger, and leave before the reply forms. The rehearsal in the winter sky shows the flaw. The reply is already formed. The top turret is aimed before the attacker is in line. The noseman does not need a perfect lead. He needs a lead that forces a flinch. The ball, even when the pass comes steeply from below, throws a rake that drags the fighter through light and impact. The first mistake costs paint. The second costs glass. The third costs blood. There is another truth inside the metal. Ammunition management is not romance. It is arithmetic under stress. Belts run down, barrels heat, feed jams happen. The American design answers with redundancy. Arcs overlap so that a dead gun does not open a door. A tired gunner is carried by a partner whose arc crosses his. The system is not fragile, it bends and still works. The Germans mark this with a thin circle on the board. Resilience, the word sits there cold and final. Formation practice is the real alarm. You do not attack a fortress, you attack many. Their arcs braid into a fabric that shifts as they bank and climb. The gaps you imagined do not stay still. The Luftwaffe camera ships film passes at set closures, while the fortress holds a steady course. Even then, the film shows spark points where three arcs kiss. In a real raid, the bombers corkscrew, and the gunners call out bearings in a chant. The spark points multiply, the closure windows shrink. Pilots talk in the dispersal huts after the tests. You can hear the tone go flat. The glamour of the head-on joust does not survive the chalk lines. The talk moves to new angles, high astern with a shallow drift, coordinated slashing from oblique high with cannon shells timed to burst, massed rockets to rattle the box before guns engage, heavy twin-engine fighters that can throw weight from outside the worst zones. The old bravery remains, but it is now leashed to diagrams. Engineers take their turn at the same table. Armor glass and armored plates make notes of their own. The fortress carries both. Self-sealing tanks buy time the way a shield buys breath. The enemy had seen bombers limp home with holes like doors. They had not understood how much punishment the structure could take while still throwing fire. Now they do. The report adds a quiet line that matters. Damage tolerance plus defensive overlap equals persistence. Persistence equals mission completion, more often than expected. There is a human line that runs through every page. Surprise. You hear it in the voices on the film when a camera ship holds a pass a second too long and the empty gun sights of the fortress still make the pilot flinch. You see it when a ground man tests a turret traverse and feels how smoothly the ring races under his hands. You read it in the marginalia where a pilot writes a blunt sentence. This is not an easy target. The winter day closes early. The fortress is towed back under the roof. The men go home with pencils dulled and eyes widened. The doctrine they will print will favour concentration, heavier weapons and disciplined beams. The reckless single ship charge becomes a story you tell to new pilots as a warning, not a boast. The captured airplane did not insult them, it educated them. The next raids over the Reich will feel the change. Attacks will come in staggered waves from new angles with rockets and air-to-air cannon set to explode just short. The bombers will answer with the same old chorus. Fields will interlock. Trails of flame will cross. Some fighters will break through. Many will not. The space between the lines will be filled by grit and geometry. The first time the engagement zone reveals itself, it does not shout. It forms the way frost forms on glass. A pattern appears. A warning follows. The camera ship holds station and watches a Messerschmitt slide down the forward quarter at a measured closure. The fortress does not fire. It only turns its turrets with quiet certainty. You can see the imaginary streams cross in front of the fighter like rails that have already been laid. The passage narrows. The moment hardens. The fighter jinks early and breaks not from bullets, but from the picture that the mind completes. Hans Werner Lerche takes the fortress through a shallow bank and calls headings to the boardmen with grease pencils. He wants a lattice. He wants an atlas that a pilot can read in 3 heartbeats. High ahead shows a wedge owned by the top turret and the forward gun. Low ahead shows the ball turret reaching upward with a rake that defies the old myth. Beam shows waist stations that do not merely spray but stitch diagonals that gate every clean drift. Dead astern, the tail writes a line that never looks long, yet always feels too long. The names of the stations fade. The shapes of their reach remain. German engineers map those shapes on transparent sheets. They stack them and hold them to a lamp. The air around the fortress glows with zones that look like petals around a steel flower. Each petal overlaps. Each overlap removes a choice. The lesson is not poetry, it is denial. Opportunities collapse from many to few. The few tilt toward angles that steal time and stretch risk. The engagement zone is no longer a ring that you cross. It is a living volume that punishes hesitation and rewards only the perfectly timed strike. Flight leads who grew up on head-on bravado feel the change in the gut first. You can hear it on the ground when they talk through film strips frame by frame. A head-on pass survives. If the closure is fast, the drift is true, and the dive is planned 2 seconds before the guns speak. The margin that once felt human now feels surgical. Miss by a finger width and the top turret scrubs your canopy. Arrive half a second late and the ball throws a ladder of fire into your chest. The mind learns before the doctrine updates. The eyes do the rest. A Focke-Wulf comes from high oblique, with a measured roll and a cannon burst set to timed fuses. The camera sees a smart idea bite into its own tail. The roll holds the fighter in the upper hemisphere longer than the pilot expects. The top turret keeps him honest. The waist guns catch him as he crosses the beam. He is safe only when he is fast enough to be gone. The board men draw a slim channel through 3 dark petals and put a dot at the end. The dot is the exit. It is small. The psychological weight builds in dispersed huts as much as in the sky. Pilots run hands over the chalked petals and stop at the blank spaces that are not truly blank. These are the places where the fortress looks least dangerous, but still turns, with a turret that is a second faster than guessed. The discovery stings. Not because the fortress is invincible, but because it is tireless. The guns do not care about your glory. They care about arcs and feed belts and traverse speed. They care about teamwork practiced in a world of noise and vibration. They care about enough. Lerche keeps flying the pattern, changing altitude and bank angle, to test how the lattice flexes when the bomber moves like a crew would move under fire. The lattice does not break. It shifts and heals. Yaw brings one arc to cover another. A corkscrew maneuver drags the net across the sky, so that the same approach vector becomes a different problem every 3 seconds. The fighters in the tests see it in the numbers. Closure that promised one lane now delivers another. A pass planned in certainty becomes a pass executed in doubt. Doctrine begins to lean into this reality. Attack leaders rehearse staggered slashes from high astern, with spreads that push cannon shells into the seams at long range. They talk about rockets to rattle the box before the merge. They argue for twin engine types with heavy guns that can work from outside the worst cones. The single ship hero pass loses its halo, not because men are less brave, because the math is less kind. The engagement zone has made gallantry inefficient and discipline essential. There is a human echo on the bomber side that the Germans cannot ignore. The sight of a waist gunner at his window with feet braced and eyes level, the top turret man, whose traverse is smooth as a gramophone, the tail gunner, who never rushes the lead. These are not myths, these are habits. Habits sharpened by missions where a minute of steady fire means 20 miles closer to home. The engagement zone is built by metal, but it is sustained by men who measure their own fear and then set it aside because the arc must be held. The test week ends with a simple truth written in plain script at the bottom of a board. If you enter the wrong space, you pay. If you stay too long in any space, you pay more. The pilots who fly again after writing that line carry it like a weight in a pocket. The weight is useful. It keeps hands from drifting. It keeps eyes ahead of the nose. It keeps the pass about geometry and not about pride. Back in the hangar, the fortress sits with panels off and turrets at rest. The petals still glow in the minds of the men who circled it. No one says the word invulnerable. No one says the word easy. They say something colder. Underestimate at cost. Overstay at cost. Attack with a plan or do not attack at all. The engagement zone has no mercy. It only has rules. The board work hardens into orders. Flight leads carry the petal maps in their heads and begin to cut new grooves into the sky. The change is not loud. It moves in briefings where the chalk pauses longer at range numbers. It moves in the dispersal huts, where the books on gunnery sit open to pages on deflection and time on target. The old straight rush gives way to slashing lines that shave risk by small, hard margins. Courage stays. Shape changes. The first answer is distance. Fighters test longer bursts from oblique high with cannon fused to break just short of the bomber stream. Air breaks near glass, rivets quiver, crews duck and recover. The fighters stay outside the worst cones a heartbeat longer. They buy that heartbeat with energy. They dive away before the top turret rakes the canopy. It looks clinical on film. It feels thin in the seat. Thin but better than the old charge. The second answer is weight. Twin engine types carry heavy guns and meet the box at angles that let them throw iron from outside the closest petals. 30mm pulses leave ovals in the air. 37mm shells tap at the span of a wing like a hammer that demands respect. These strikes do not require a long stay. They require a clean approach, a short string, and a hard exit. The geometry begins to favor those who accept that patience is a weapon. The third answer is shock. Under wings grow tubes that fire 21cm rockets. Frames tremble as they leave. The rockets do not hunt, they herd. Explosions tear at the formation confidence and force small corrections. Small corrections disrupt the lattice. Gunners must choose between threats. The choice costs seconds. Seconds cost arcs. A fighter slips into a seam and throws a burst before the net heals. It works sometimes. Sometimes the seam is already gone. The fourth answer is armor. Single-engine fighters gain extra plates and bullet-resistant glass. They become blunt tools meant to live one pass longer inside the storm. Close work is assigned to the most disciplined pilots. They must hold a line through the engagement volume and trust that their protection will carry them through the first sparks. Many still break early when the tracers climb. Some keep going and find the bombers larger and more vulnerable at knife range. The tail guns disagree. The waist guns disagree. The exit path becomes the coin toss. Test fields feed this evolution with measured loops. Hans Werner Lerche flies the Fortress again to confirm what the moving net looks like when the bomber corkscrews under pressure. The fighters replay passes at revised angles and speeds. Grease pencils redraw the channels thinner and longer. The pattern that emerges is stern. Every new tactic that promises safety demands more discipline, more timing, and more teamwork than the bravado strikes of the first year. The price is not only risk. The price is training minutes that the calendar does not always grant. Doctrine documents mirror this grind. Attack in groups, stagger beams, share the merge. Do not loiter under the tail. Do not linger on the beam. Break early if the closure is off by more than a breath. Use rockets to break the box. Use cannon at range to open a door. Use armored types to push through the door for one short burst, then leave. The words are dry. The meaning is not. The Fortress has dragged the fight from swagger into geometry. The only way back is arithmetic of your own. There is a quiet admission inside the shops. Airframes change to carry the new intent. Gun packs grow. Ammunition feeds bulge. Sight systems adjust to predict lead at higher closures. Radios take a greater role because timing across several slashes matters more than the glory inside one. The fighter force steps closer to a picture where the single pilot is a part, not the story. Pride tightens, but it does not crack. Men will do what works if the orders are clear and the odds are honest. Raid days write the real record. You can read it in the trails. Early strikes that once piled into a head-on corridor now fan across the upper sphere like claws reaching for a prize behind glass. Midday slashes rake the beams in disciplined files and vanish before the waist guns have fully walked the lead. Heavier fighters hang at standoff and throw bursts that arrive like thrown stones at windows. The bombers bend and hold. Some fall. Many do not. The engagement zone keeps charging a toll in seconds and nerve. The bomber side feels the shift and answers with its own refinements. Gunners drill crosstalk until bearings sound like a drumbeat. Leaders practice small formation moves that heal seams faster. The lattice grows more agile without growing complex. The Fortress remains what it was built to be: a survivor by structure, a punisher by overlap, a mission maker by habit. Pilots in fighter-ready rooms pin new diagrams beside old photographs. The diagrams matter more. The photographs matter still. You cannot remove the need to face the wall of fire. You can only choose when and how to enter it. The best days come when weather, timing, and teamwork let the plan play through. The worst days come when a small error multiplies inside the lattice and the exit dot becomes a myth. The arithmetic of courage does not balance every time. By winter's end, the rethink is no longer a debate. It is muscle memory. Crews launch with rockets hung, cannon belts full, armor glass polished. Briefings end on words that feel heavy and fair. Disciplined timing angles exit. The men know why. They have flown the old way and seen what the petals do to pride. The captured Fortress did not create this evolution. It accelerated it. The tests gave pictures that could not be argued down. Pictures have a way of becoming orders. Orders have a way of becoming survival. The geometry that once belonged to the bombers alone is now a shared language spoken at speed with steel and fire. The ledger that crews carried home after each raid was never only about aircraft destroyed. It was also about minutes survived. The Fortress wrote its value in those minutes. Defensive firepower filled the air with consequences and turned clean attack windows into dirty calculations. Fighters that had once pressed head-on passes with swagger now measured approach time in heartbeats and bled away seconds to caution. Those seconds reshaped the day. A bomber stream moves like a river through weather flak and intercepts. Every fighter that breaks early or jinks wide or chooses a longer standoff burst because the engagement volume feels crowded reduces pressure at the point of highest risk. The waist guns do not need to mark a smoking spiral for that to matter. A burst that forces a fighter low alters the geometry of the next pass. A top turret that tracks early steals the cleanest line from a high oblique strike and pushes it into a thinner corridor. A tail sting that holds its rhythm makes a pilot exit sooner than planned and robs him of the second pass he promised himself on the climb-out. None of these moments look like a victory on paper, all of them by distance. Fuel is a hard teacher. Interceptors that spend more time shaping a safe entry spend more fuel before their first trigger squeeze. A cautious merge followed by a long diving exit leaves less margin for a second attempt. The fortress does not win a duel. It alters the arithmetic that decides whether there can be another duel at all. Over a long mission, the arithmetic builds like ice on a wing. Weight grows, performance fades. A fighter that must husband energy to live through the exit is a fighter that arrives at the next wave with less to give. Crew psychology is not decoration. It is a component. A gunner who has drilled bearings and led under noise and cold builds a calm that projects outward. You can see it in films where a waist window holds a steady arc while flak bursts pop against the cloud deck. You can hear it in interphone tapes where a tail voice reports a tracking contact without hurry. That calm sets tempo inside the ship and across the box. Tempo holds formation. Formation tightens interlock. Interlock restricts approach lanes. Each link is quiet. Together they form a memory that escorts the stream toward the target and back again. Damage tolerance adds the other half of the picture. Armor glass that keeps a pilot behind his controls. Self-sealing tanks that turn a bright strike into a stain. Redundant control runs that keep a roll alive when a panel is gone. Defensive firepower multiplies the value of these traits because it reduces the time the enemy can spend finishing what the first burst began. An interceptor that must break at range more often leaves a bomber wounded rather than killed. Wounded aircraft clutter the sky with difficult targets, but they also demonstrate to their own crews that survival is not a rumor. That demonstration hardens men for the next day. A campaign feeds on that kind of proof. Claims on both sides were always fogged by speed and fear. Tallies could not capture the sorties, never pressed. The brakes taken 1 second sooner. The cannon bursts loosed. Half a wing farther out the rockets fired as a herd tool rather than a killing tool, because the seam close to the beam, no longer looked honest. What the ledger could capture over time was persistence. Raids kept reaching airfields and factories that lay deeper into defended airspace. Losses remained painful, yet enough bombers lived through enough days to make those targets endure cumulative damage. Defensive firepower as a system was the constant that reduced the worst spikes and kept crews inside the envelope where mission completion remained plausible. None of this erases the cost paid by the men in the stream. It clarifies what their guns achieved beyond the visible. A waist gun that stitched a harmless string into empty air might have pinned a fighter that would otherwise have rolled into a beam lane on the lead ship. A top turret that tracked early might have forced a cannon burst to detonate short, saving a cockpit from a hail of glass. A tail sting that held fire 1 second longer might have turned a confident pursuit into a respectful break and spared the radio room a second encounter. Statistics can count holes and wrecks. They struggle to count decisions made under the shadow of those arcs. Doctrine on the interceptor side changed because pictures from the captured fortress made denial impossible. Rockets, standoff cannons, staggered slashes, heavier armor, and stricter timing were all admissions that the old playbook wasted men. Doctrine on the bomber side matured under the same pressure. Crosstalk tightened. Formation moves were rehearsed to heal seams without panic. The lattice became a living habit rather than a brittle plan. The geometry that test pilots mapped over winter fields became a language that crews spoke without thinking when the horizon filled with smoke bursts and contrails. The long view is not romance, it is a working truth. Defensive firepower did not win days on its own. It partnered with structure, training, navigation, weather judgment, and later long-range escort. Its particular share was time. Time to hold formation, time to reach the initial point, Time to turn for home with enough ships still together to punish the last beam strikes. Time to fly again. In a campaign made of thousands of small, hard choices, time is a currency as real as fuel or ammunition. The fortress earned it by overlapping arcs that made courage costly and hesitation rational. Every minute purchased that way carried weight no tally sheet could fully translate, but crews felt it in their bones when wheels touched down and engines ticked cool. The winter, when the captured bomber flew under German hands, did not write a single verdict. It wrote a map. That map read honestly, told both sides what the air would demand next. Fighters learned that entry and exit mattered more than bravado. Bombers learned that steady hands beat loud hands. The sky kept charging its toll. The men kept paying it. The fortresses that came home in battered files were the proof that the price was buying something larger than any one engagement. Persistence. Reach. Another chance to take off at dawn and try again.